We're back out here at the Big Lake once again, and today we're talking about fishing those hot days in August and the baits and tricks that I'm using to keep catching those fish, including a couple of forgotten classics. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. And there's another one. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And as we know, August can be the hardest month of the entire year to catch those bass. That water is as warm as it is going to get, and that makes the fishing that much more hard. So what can we do as anglers? There's got to be some techniques, there's got to be some tips and tricks that are going to keep those bass coming to the boat or coming to the bank, right? Well, no matter what you do, a lot of times it's just going to be hard. You've heard me say it before, and it still holds true. Summer is fishing on hard mode, but it's not all bad news. The skills that you develop right now, if you can still keep catching fish in the dog days of summer, well, when fall and winter and especially spring rolls around, it will be so much easier. So keep at it. The skills that you are building right now will pay dividends for you the rest of the year. But even still, that doesn't mean that we can't go out and keep catching fish. Keep catching nice fish. It's going to take a little bit of an adjustment, especially if you're fishing from the bank, because those fish are going to want to pull back out into deeper water. And a lot of times, that's going to be the hard part from the bank, isn't it? Is finding that access to deeper water. But if you can find access to deeper water, such as the first third of a creek arm, right? That is a prime spot that the bass are holding up in right now. They're not necessarily going all the way out into the main lake, especially if that creek arm is big enough that it has a resident year-round population of bass. A lot of times they've just pulled out to the middle of that creek. And a lot of times that's still within casting distance of the bank. So don't give up. As I've said before, use your Google Earth, use graphs and charts if you can find them. You can go on Navionics, you can look at that online, and you can find those places around the bank that you can still make casts from. Now, when it comes to the boat, well, obviously that's going to be a little bit different animal, isn't it? Because you have access to that deeper water. You're just driving out to it or floating out to it or whatever. And focusing on fishing out deeper is what I've been doing a lot lately. I'm known mainly as a shallow water fisherman, someone who skips up under brush, someone who fishes a lot of Texas rigworms and drags a jig a lot. And yeah, that's true, but that doesn't mean that I don't go out deep and fish deeper water whenever the need arises or whenever the opportunity presents itself. If I know those bass are going to be there and I know they're going to bite, well, that's where I'm going to go. And a lot of times, you can find a good bite even without electronics just by using the Yo Noodle. And that's what I've been doing recently with the little boat, right? I mean, the little boat right there, right? It doesn't have any electronics on it. You can see that, right? So I'm having to use what I know about bass behavior and patterns to go out to be able to put myself on fish. And in deeper water especially, that's more of a challenge. So again, I'm practicing what I preach. I'm looking at my maps online. I'm looking at Google Earth online before I even head out, so I've got a good idea where I want to target. I'm knowing the water depth and the underwater structure before I'm going out there. I'm not just going all higgledy-piggledy. Well, that's a crazy phrase. But I'm not just going out there, randomly casting. I already have an idea in mind of what I want to fish and where I want to fish it. And you guys know this thing right here has been money for me lately. This is a Quiet KVD 2.5 square bill by Strike King in the sexy shad color. This has been probably the hero so far. I've caught so many fish on this in the past month, easily more than I ever have before. because we have pressured bass in this lake. So I wanted to go with that more quiet presentation. The past few videos, if you've seen them, well, this guy has played a primary role in a lot of the fish catches that I've shown on the video. So again, today I wanted to tie this on, get in the little boat, and head out to that same stretch of water, work it from the south to the north because that's the way the wind was blowing today. And I wanted to cover that region. I wanted to make casts, find where those bass are, and then, you know, I was using this not only to search, but hopefully get a few bites. But today I found something a little bit odd. Those bass, they were actually a little bit deeper than they had been. And that square bill wasn't quite getting the job done. I needed to change my tactics. I needed to adapt. So I tied this on. And this is a Strike King 5XD. This is going to get me into some deeper water. And I actually had to move down the lake a little bit because that's where the bass were splashing. That's where they were busting up. That's where I was seeing the signs of life. So I tied this guy on, and I'm telling you what, in the first couple of casts, bam, I was on fish. All right, we have this sexy shad kind of colored 5XD. We've moved out pretty darn deep. I want to hunt some bigs today and see where we can find somebody to play with. I believe we should be in deep enough water here that we should be able to run this old 5XD pretty good. Oh yeah. That's kind of what I'm looking to do right here is kind of need to loosen that up some, don't I? There we go. Just in case I hook into a tank, I want to be able to actually reel it in without breaking my line. The thing about working one of these great big deep diving cranks, oh, there we go, I got one. Stay down, stay down, stay down. Ah. Oh, there he is. Ow, son of a gun, you little, boy, you spastic little thing. You got me and you. And it's not even that big, it's just a little 3/4 pounder, not even a whole pound. And he wanted that deep diving 5XD, but that tells me that they are out here. All right, thank you, little buddy. Let's keep on going. So that tells us they're out here deep. It is not super deep, but it is pretty windy today. And there's another one. They are out deep, kids. Little, not a great big one, but we'll take it. We will definitely take it. And he ate it like, again, he ate it like he wanted it. There we go. Nice little 1 pounder, maybe just north of 1 pounder. He's bigger than the one we just caught, so. But they're out here, they're schooled up out here. Thank you, little dude. So this was a nice alternative to have. You know, I mean, it gave me something different to throw. They weren't really deep enough that I needed to go any deeper than the 5XD. A 6XD would have been too deep. I was still getting a little bit of vegetation on the bottom of this, so I knew I was at the right depth. And I knew this pattern, since they were hitting the sexy shad pattern with the KVD 2.5, that this was actually a good choice, and it turned out to be. So, like I said, within a couple of casts, I was on fish, and I caught some nice fish on this thing today, so that turned out to be a really good pattern. We had a little bit of wind today, a little bit of chop on the water. I didn't bring any spinner baits with me today, but what I did bring was this. an old Bill Lewis chrome and blue rattle trap, right? It's got the rattles in it. When's the last time you fished with one of these? These things go back, what, 50 years or more? They are the original, modern style lipless crankbaits. I mean, you've got the old Pico perch and things like that back in the day. But as far as a lipless crankbait, the original, the progenitor of it, this is probably what most people think of. And these things are still money today. I throw one every chance I get. And today was a great day to pick it up and throw it. And all through the month of August, I will be using this, especially on days when I've got that wind, when I've got a little bit of chop, because I get that shine in the water. I've got this one, and I went with a gold one today, but this one right here, this was the star. Now, another classic bait that I've been able to do well on, similar to the old rattle trap, is this guy right here, right? The old Cotton Cordell Super Spot. Very much like the rattle trap. In fact, it probably copies it. It's got a very similar body style minus the fin. It's got a very similar action in the water, the way it retrieves. It tends to be just a little bit lighter. It says it's a ½ ounce, but I still feel like it's a little bit lighter. But the thing about these is these are like, what, $3 or $4 at Walmart? The rattle trap, while not super expensive, can still run you $7 or $8 depending on where you buy it. These, they're like $3, $4 at Walmart all day long. And this thing here, I don't know if you can see all the teeth marks. This thing's caught so many fish. I don't know how many fish it's caught. It's been in my tackle box for years, and I love this thing. So this is another one you don't want to miss out on. And the great thing about a trap or another, type of lipless crankbait is you can work these from the bank. They are great from the bank, and there's so many different ways that we can retrieve these and we can work with these. Let's head out on the water, and I'm going to show you a few. These are my favorites, and these are what really work for me. All right, now the great thing about an old Bill Lewis rattle trap is you can fish them shallow, but you can also fish them deep. I'm in a little bit deeper water here, and I'm going to show you a couple of retrieves, including a really super sneaky one that, it really gets them, especially when they're kind of in a lethargic mood. But I'm just kind of doing, like this. I've got my rod tip down. I'm letting that bait stay low in the water column, and I'm just kind of doing it like this. Kind of pausing it every few seconds, not really fast. I'm kind of doing it as a slower retrieve, bringing it back to me and doing that again, casting it out there. And I'm just kind of doing like this, kind of keeping that rod tip down, because I want to keep that bait lower in the water column. I'm just kind of meandering, altering the speed that I'm doing the reeling with. Faster, slower, couple little quick turns in there every once in a while. And obviously another retrieve you can do is pretty much the opposite of that, where you can burn it and then kill it, and then burn it and then kill it, and then burn it and then kill it, and just like you're doing a square bill, right, or a deep diving crank or something like that, and then kill it. If you've got those fish are maybe not necessarily wanting to eat, that's a good way to get them triggered to eat, because what that does is it zips it right by their head, and their instinct kicks in, and they've got to attack it. They have to. And don't worry, you are not going to outrun those fish. Now, one more kind of last little sneaky retrieve that I learned from guys who fish in South Florida, Okeechobee, the Kissimmee chain, all of that. And that is, this is really sneaky, and it's really effective. You treat it like you would a flutter spoon. You cast it out there, and you're going to let it sink, and you're going to let it go all the way to the bottom, and then you're going to rip it up just like that. And you're going to let it sink, and you're going to let it hit the bottom, and then you're going to rip it up just like that. And you can feel it. You can feel it when you're doing that. You can feel that. And the way this came about was, You know, a lot of those lakes down in South Florida are just like the lakes we have here in South Mississippi, and they are shallow and just full of vegetation. So that was something they came up with because they were constantly having to pull their baits out of the vegetation. You know, so they were constantly having to rip their baits out of the vegetation. So they would develop that, and they would notice that those bass would hit their bait, you know, whenever they ripped it like that. So they say, well, what if I just do that the entire retrieve? And lo and behold, it turned out to be a pretty successful way to fish. You know, and the thing about a rattle trap is you can hear it, you know, it almost sounds like a cricket. Brrr, brrr, whenever you do that, you know. So cast it out there. Like I said, we're going to basically just let it sink down and then rip it up. And then let it sink down and then rip it up. And we're going to do that pretty much all the way back to the boat. And the thing is fishing it like that, ripping it up and letting it fall like a flutter spoon, that type of retrieve came about almost by necessity, right? Because in Florida, shallower lakes, you're constantly ripping it through grass. So that's something that those guys came up with years ago as they were fishing it through the grass. I'm going to show you another. I got him. I got you, buddy. He came up and he side-swiped it. That's what you want to see on a lipless right there. He tried to T-bone it, as they say. All right. There we are. Beautiful little fish, about 1 pound. So, let's go ahead and, all right, we're going to go ahead and say thank you to him. Beautiful little fish. Thank you so much, little buddy. Woo, nice little splash, cooled us off. Thank you. All right, on to the next one. Now, lastly, we've got a couple of old-time classics that I've just started throwing here in the past couple of days. And it was funny because I was getting follows on them to begin with. I mean, little bitty, you know, 3 and 4 inch little bass that were obviously from this last year's spawn. And they were grouped up 4 or 5 or more following my bait in until I got more follows, and I was getting 1.5 pound, 2 pound bass following in until I actually was able to hook up on a couple of those nicer ones. And the bait that started that process was this guy right here. This is a Rebel Deep We Are, right? Another bait that's been around for a long time. And the reason why I'm throwing this really loud chartreuse and green one is because we had a storm that came through and it really churned up a lot of silt in the lake. So for a couple of days, that water was actually pretty cloudy. So I threw this and I started getting follows with it, and I started getting better follows until eventually, you know, I hooked into a couple of nice fish. And it really surprised me, you know. I mean, we put these in the back of our mind. We remember throwing things like this as, you know, kids when we were fishing. But how many of us actually pick these things up and still throw them today? Hardly anybody that I can think of, and they're still great deep crankbaits. And another one that really surprised me is this right here. Anybody know what this is? This is a Cotton Cordell CC shad. And these things go way, way back. The CC does not stand for Cotton Cordell. It stands for color selector, right? You remember the old color selector where you put one end in the water and the gauge told you what color bait you should be throwing that day? Well, they still make the baits that go with them, and they're great little deep diving cranks. They get down to about 4 or 5 feet. They've got a nice little action in the water. And I had one yesterday, or the day before yesterday, scared me to death as I was about to pull it out of the water. A bass shot out of nowhere and smashed it right there at the boat. And like I said, startled me. I didn't even expect it. So these things can still get the job done. Now, the thing about these is that I've noticed is they're not really suited for today's modern reels. So you have to kind of think about that. You have to work these a little bit differently. You've got to work these a little bit softer, a little bit more slowly. Otherwise, they tend to pull up and out of the water. If you want to keep them down in the water column, you've got to kind of crank them a little bit more slowly and be a little bit more gingerly with them. But I'm telling you what, these things can still get the job done. And again, when's the last time you even thought about this type of bait? When's the last time you even threw one of these? And nobody else on the water's throwing these. So what do we always say? Show them something different. Keep those bass on their toes, as it were, right? Because they get acclimated to things a lot more quickly than you think they do. And a lot of times you just need to keep rotating things out. Even when something is working, you may want to have something on the back burner in your back pocket just in case. So those bass, well, they don't get too used to one thing. So there you have it. Some old school baits and a couple of new school baits that really are working well for me so far this August. Those older baits, I didn't even really think about them until I looked down in my tackle box and I saw them and I decided, you know what? Nobody else is throwing those. So if you can get a chance to get some of those, like I said, they're not expensive. They're only a few dollars at Walmart. You can really make a difference in your August fishing game. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.